In 1951, a prime minister was shot dead in a crowd. In 1979, another was hanged on false charges. In 2007, a woman was assassinated moments after waving to supporters. All three shared a name. All three shared a fate. The Bhutto family didn't just rule Pakistan. They were consumed by it. This is a story of a dynasty built on democracy, destroyed by dictators, and cursed by the very power they sought to wield. Some families are born into wealth, others into politics. The Bhuttos were born into both, and into a violence that would stalk them across 3 generations like a shadow they could never outrun. IT began with Shahnawaz Bhutto, a wealthy Sindhi landlord who built an empire in colonial India. But empires of land are nothing compared to empires of ambition. His son, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, would trade acres for votes, transforming the Bhutto name from a regional power into a national obsession. What Zulfikar couldn't know, what no one could know, was that he was writing not a political legacy, but a family curse. The father, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, 1928 to 1979. Zulfikar was brilliant, arrogant, and intoxicated by power. Educated at Berkeley and Oxford, he moved through Pakistan's early years like a man who knew he was destined for greatness. By 1963, he was foreign minister, charming the world with his Oxford accent and socialist rhetoric. By 1967, he had founded the Pakistan People's Party, PPP, a leftist movement that promised roti, kapra, or makan, bread, clothing, and shelter for every Pakistani. In 1971, Pakistan shattered. East Pakistan became Bangladesh after a brutal war, and the military dictator Yahya Khan fell. Zulfikar stepped into the wreckage and became president, then prime minister, the first civilian leader of a broken country. He was 43 years old and believed he could rebuild Pakistan in his image. For 6 years he tried. He nationalized industries, reformed land ownership, built a new constitution, and positioned Pakistan as a leader of the Muslim world. But Zulfikar's brilliance was matched only by his hubris. He crushed dissent, rigged elections, and surrounded himself with sycophants who told him what he wanted to hear. He believed he was untouchable. He was wrong. General Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq was a quiet man, a religious officer who seemed harmless. Zulfikar promoted him to army chief, believing loyalty could be purchased with rank. On July 5, 1977, Zia seized power in a coup while Zulfikar slept. The man who had built a dynasty in 6 years lost it in 6 hours. What followed was a show trial so transparently false that even Zia's allies winced. Zulfikar was accused of ordering a political murder, a charge manufactured from thin air. The judge who sentenced him to death had been blackmailed. Zia's agents held his family hostage. On April 4, 1979, at 2 a.m., Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was hanged in Rawalpindi District Jail. His last words to his jailers, "I am innocent." He was 51 years old. His daughter was 25, the daughter, Benazir Bhutto, 1953 to 2007. Benazir grew up in privilege and ended it in martyrdom. She was educated at Harvard and Oxford, a product of the elite world her father had conquered. When Zia arrested Zulfikar, Benazir became his voice of the world, traveling to capitals, meeting leaders, building the myth of the Bhuttos as Pakistan's only true Democrats. After her father's execution, Zia threw her into house arrest, then prison, then solitary confinement. She spent 5 years in and out of detention, reading, writing, and hardening into something her father's advisors didn't recognize. A politician cold enough to survive in 1988, Zia died in a plane crash so suspicious that conspiracy theories still circulate. Within months, Benazir won Pakistan's first free elections in 11 years. At 35, she became the first female prime minister of a Muslim country. The world celebrated. Time magazine put her on the cover. She was a daughter of the East, a symbol of hope. But Pakistan doesn't forgive hope. Benazir's first term collapsed in corruption scandals. Some real, many manufactured by the military establishment that had never accepted civilian rule. Her husband, Asif Ali Zardari, became known as Mr. 10% for alleged kickbacks. Dismissed in 1990. She won again in 1993 and was dismissed again in 1996. The pattern was clear. The military allowed elections, then destroyed the results. Exiled in 1999, Benazir spent 8 years in London and Dubai, negotiating her return. General Pervez Musharraf, the latest soldier to seize power, promised her safety if she stayed out of politics. She agreed, then broke her word. Because a Bhutto doesn't stay quiet, and a Bhutto doesn't stay away on October 18, 2007, Benazir returned to Karachi. 2 million people lined the streets to welcome her. Suicide bombers attacked her motorcade, killing 139 people. Benazir survived barely and continued campaigning. She knew they would try again. She knew, and she stayed. On December 27, 2007, she stood through the sunroof of her armored SUV in Rawalpindi's Liaquat Bagh, waving to supporters after a rally. A gunman fired 3 shots. A suicide bomb followed. Benazir fell back into the vehicle, her hair and shawl covered in blood. She was dead before reaching the hospital. She was 54 years old. Her children were 19, 17, and 14. The official investigation blamed a 15-year-old suicide bomber. The UN Commission called the security arrangements fatally insufficient. Benazir supporters blamed Musharraf, the military, the ISI, the Taliban, everyone and no one. What mattered was a pattern. Another Bhutto, another assassination, another generation left to carry the weight. The sons, Murtaza and Shahnawaz Benazir, wasn't the only child to suffer. Her brothers, Murtaza and Shahnawaz, grew up in their father's shadow and died in his footsteps. Shahnawaz, the youngest, fled Afghanistan after Zulfikar's execution and joined resistance groups. In 1985, he was found dead in his apartment in Cannes, France, poisoned, his family insisted, by Pakistani agents. He was 26 and Murtaza was a wild one, charismatic, violent, and obsessed with avenging his father. He formed al-Zulfikar, an armed militant group that hijacked a Pakistani airliner in 1981 and killed a hostage. Exiled for years, he returned to Pakistan in 1993, expecting to join Benazir's government. Instead, they fought over power, over policy, over who truly represented their father's legacy. On September 20th, 1996, police ambushed Murtaza outside his Karachi home. In the shootout that followed, 7 of his bodyguards died. Murtaza was executed, shot at close range while wounded on the ground. Benazir was prime minister at the time. Her husband, Zardari, was accused of ordering the hit. The truth disappeared into the same darkness that swallows all Bhutto truths. Murtaza was 42. His daughter, Fatima, was 14, the heir. Bilal Bhutto Zardari, 1988. When Benazir died, her 19-year-old son became co-chairman of the PPP alongside his father. It was absurd. A teenager leading a party his grandfather had founded half a century earlier. But in Pakistan, dynasties don't ask permission. They inherit. Bilal was educated at Oxford, like his mother, like his grandfather. He speaks with the same polished accent, the same rhetorical flair. In 2022, at 33, he became Pakistan's foreign minister, the youngest in history. He smiles for cameras, tweets in English and Urdu, and carries the Bhutto name like both a crown and a target, and he knows the math. His grandfather was hanged. His mother was shot. His uncles were poisoned and executed. Every Bhutto who reached for power died by violence. And yet he reaches anyway, because the dynasty demands it, because Pakistan has no other mechanism for civilian leadership, because somewhere in the DNA of this cursed family, there's a gene that cannot stop fighting. The curse, is it really a curse? Or is it simply the logic of Pakistani politics? A military that refuses to share power, an establishment that destroys anyone who threatens its control, a society so fractured that democracy becomes a blood sport. The Bhuttos were not saints. Zulfikar rigged elections and crushed opponents. Benazir's governments were corrupt and ineffective. Zardari, who became president after her death, was accused of everything from murder to embezzlement. The dynasty's claim to democratic virtue is complicated by their own sins, but the violence against them is real and it is systematic. No other Pakistani political family has suffered so consistently, so lethally. The Sharifs have been exiled and imprisoned, but they live. The Bhuttos die. Perhaps the curse is simply ambition in a country that punishes ambition. Perhaps it is the price of challenging an army that believes it owns Pakistan. Perhaps it is the inevitable result of building a political movement around a family name rather than institutions. When the family becomes the institution, destroying the family becomes strategy, or perhaps there is something older at work, something in the Sindhi soil where the Bhutto estate sit, some ancient debt that demands payment in blood across generations that Ayan Larkana. Sindh, the Bhutto mausoleum rises like a fortress of white marble. Zulfikar is buried there. Murtaza is buried there. Benazir is buried there, beside her father, beside the brother she may have betrayed. Thousands visit each year, leaving flowers and prayers, treating the dead politicians like saints. Balu visits too, laying wreaths, making speeches, promising that the Bhutto legacy will continue. He is young, healthy, and surrounded by security that would embarrass a head of state. But so was Benazir on December 27, 2007. So was Zulfikar on the night of July 4th, 1977. The mausoleum has space for more. The family has more to give. And Pakistan, for all its chaos, has more violence to offer. The Bhutto dynasty isn't over. It may never be over, because in Pakistan, power and death are the same currency, and the Bhuttos have always been willing to pay.